Retro Warriors episode 291. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Saturn, we have housekeeping. First up, go listen to Cinema Rogues. Guy wants me to keep telling you to go listen to his show, please, for at least a few more weeks. So go do it. Also, we are streaming on Twitch again. Yeah. We're back on the Twitch. I'm streaming every Monday from 8 to 11 p.m. That's Central Time. If you go to our Twitch page, there is a schedule that will adjust to your local time so that you can go there and see. Or you can just do that conversion in your head if you're one of those cool people, you know. One
of those cool people that know math.
Yeah, one of them mathers, as we call them. No one's ever said that until right now. But yeah, we're back on Twitch. And so come hang out when we stream on Twitch. Yeah. It's fun. Guy stops by a lot Saturday, and you've stopped by a couple of times. Andrew was there last time. Yeah. It's been enjoyable. Yeah.
And we try to stream games that are coming up on the show, right? Or are we just streaming whatever happens to be around?
Well, theoretically, I'm trying to do a large chunk of my, in air quotes, research for the show on the stream, which is why we streamed previously, because the idea was that I won't get behind on stuff I need to play for the show if I have a dedicated time slot each week that I'm forced to put in several hours of playtime.
How well did that work for you?
Well, the problem there was that my schedule wasn't consistent. Right. This time I'm doing like 8 to 11, so 3 hours every Monday. That's my plan. And it's been working well. It got a little weird last time because I beat the game we're covering this week before that stream. Right. So then I had to stream the thing. Schedule. I had to stream the thing we're covering next time, but there's not a lot of gameplay there, so it's a little wonky right now. But I'm still going to be there streaming, so it'll maybe people can just watch me search on Wikipedia and write notes about the show. You laugh. I've seen people stream way more boring things. My wife and I sat down and I was like, let's watch some Twitch. I want to understand this because I'm on this platform. I feel like I should understand it. Right. And we just started watching people streaming, and I was like, first of all, 90% of the people on Twitch aren't doing anything. They're just sitting there, not speaking, like looking at a menu of a game, or like just sitting in their chair watching the chat. And I'm like, play a game. What are you doing? Talk. I don't know. Maybe I just talk too much.
What? No.
Anyway, my week, after saying, I think last November, and I'm paraphrasing myself here, but it's probably a direct quote, I don't know what Microsoft or Sony could possibly do to convince me to buy their new consoles.
Yeah.
I bought an Xbox Series X.
So did I, yeah. I actually got my order in like an hour before yours, so
you posted, it was the all access plan, and apparently what Microsoft can do is say, hey, you already give us $16 a month for Game Pass Ultimate. What about for $21 more, we give you the new Xbox?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I mean, all right, I guess.
Were you really high when they asked you that? I'm trying to figure out the situation.
And so I got it. And I told Courtney, I was like, I'm buying this Xbox and whatever. And she's like, well, you know, how much does it cost? And I was like, it'd be an additional $21 a month after tax and everything.
Yeah.
And she goes, okay, well, what do you think? And I was like, well, I wanted to get a new Blu-ray player anyway, and I want a 4K UHD one, and those are like $170 anyway, so we might as well spend all the rest of the money. We're already there. And I got it, and I do have to say, because I didn't have the Series X.
Right.
I had a 1S.
You didn't have the 1X, you mean?
Or the 1X. I had a 1S. I did not have the PS4 Pro. My computer is a 1080p gaming computer. So this is the first 4K HDR gaming that I've ever done. And so good, I did not think I would notice a difference. I was like, yeah, it might look a little better. Holy shit.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit, everything looks better.
Oh, yeah.
Everything looks like what? Like I was sitting there playing it just thinking, what have I been doing with my life? Like I just...
Hey, Justin, how was Tetris Effect?
I'm mad at you.
What?
You didn't tell me... You told me Tetris Effect was better in 4K HDR.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me how much better.
That's fucking gorgeous, man.
You weren't like, hey, you need to get it in 4K HDR because it will literally change how you think about life. You didn't tell me all of it.
No, I had mentioned how much worse it looked on my laptop, where I'm still playing it in 4K, just not in HDR. And I was like, man, it's a night and day difference. It looks so much worse on my laptop than it does in HDR on my Xbox One X. And now it looks even better than that on my Xbox Series X. And holy crap, it looks good. Oh,
it's a gorgeous looking game. It does. It also helps that I have a new TV that I just bought a few weeks ago. So I love it. 4K HDR is awesome.
Yes.
Almost everything runs at 60 FPS, which that's why I had kind of quit playing my 1S, is that my computer runs everything at a very high frame rate.
Right.
And I've gotten very accustomed to the smoothness of high frame rate gaming.
Right.
And I was having a hard time going back to like 20 and 30 FPS from, 90 upstairs.
Yeah.
And that's made a huge difference. Also, quick resume. I'm just saying it. Quick resume is the killer feature of this generation of Microsoft products. It's great. I've no attention span. I'm sure you've never noticed.
What?
I've no attention span and almost zero patience. So I constantly quit things.
Right.
Just in general in life. I quit books, movies, TV shows, activities, hobbies, events.
Jobs, friendships.
It's just everything. I'll just quit shit.
Yeah.
I'll just be like, nope, done with that. And I'll put it down. And the ability to get frustrated with a game and just go, fuck it, and just switch to something else. And then later on when I'm like, yeah, maybe I should go back to it, I can literally jump into the exact moment I got frustrated and quit.
Right.
That's a world of difference. Sometimes I sit down, I've got 20 minutes to play a game, and me booting up the Xbox, going into the game, waiting on the intro screens, waiting on the load, and getting into my game, those 3 minutes there, that's a sizable amount of my gaming time I have.
Right.
And quick resume has just, I knew I was going to like it. I didn't know I was going to like it this much. It's amazing. It's amazing
really nice.
feature.
It works really well. I don't think I've used it nearly as much as you have. And I did immediately encounter a game that was not compatible with it. But,
sometimes I'll switch games. I'll be sitting there playing a game and I'll go play one race in Forza and just go right back just because I can. I'm just like, I'm going to quick resume this. Like I'll just quit and go. That said, I have been playing Xbox games. I started and subsequently quit Control.
Yeah.
Very fun game, very interesting game. And then I started hitting the puzzles, and I hit a specific puzzle that I won't spoil for anybody, that I sat there for 30 minutes trying to figure it out, and I could not. And I was very frustrated because it's one of those puzzles that's like, here's the clues that we're very obviously pointing to.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'll do exactly what the clues say. And it didn't work.
I got a couple hours into that, and I don't remember exactly where I am, and I think I just need to restart the game at this point.
Yeah. I looked up the answer to that puzzle so that I could get past it, and the answer was such bullshit that I quit playing the game because I was like, if this is the shit they're giving me after 3 hours, I don't want to do the later puzzles. I don't want to have to look up every puzzle I run into in a game.
I have experience with Remedy's bullshit puzzles from having played Quantum Break and Alan Wake and Max Payne. Well, Max Payne didn't really have puzzles, but still. So I am used to their level of bullshittery. So I don't think it affected me as much.
I didn't know that they were renowned bullshitters. But yeah, fuck that. The game is very fun though. If you really like puzzles and like getting stumped by puzzles that are kind of, I guess,
obtuse.
Subversive is a nice way to put it.
Yeah. And really, their strength has always been storytelling. They do a great job of making an interactive story that still feels like it's action.
I've been playing the Halos. Got my new Series X and I booted it up and I turned on Halo and I was like, yep, Halo 1 plays real good on this. And I've been getting really into Forza Horizon 4.
Nice.
Which is just what a great game. I'd started it. A friend of mine is really into it. And a while back he was like, dude, you got to get on Forza Horizon 4. And I got on it. And the first like 30 minutes to an hour of the game, it's like a lot of cutscenes and people talking to you. And I was like, I don't fuck. Yeah, I was like, I don't. Well, I mean, and sometimes like I like games with story, but I in a racing game, I'm like, I just want to race cars, dude.
Right.
Stop talking to me. Go away. But after that first hour, all that shit, there's just out the window, and they're like, here's a big map with stuff to do.
Nice.
And it is a stellar game.
Nice.
Aside from that first hour, I'm having more fun with this than I've probably had with any racing game ever.
Nice.
It's just so much fun. It's always literally everything you do. It's filling little bars above at the top of your screen and giving you points for it. And I know it's just like a dumb Pavlovian response.
Oh yeah.
But I just love that I'm like, hey, I'm racing real good. Look at all my points I'm getting. Hey, I'm smashing through people's property. Look at all the points I'm getting. Hey, I flipped my car upside down. Look, I got points for it. Like it's just one of those really, really positive games that everything you do, the game's like, we like that. Keep doing that. You're doing good, buddy. As you lose every race and smash into every wall. It's fantastic. I think I've put in maybe 8 to 10 hours on it. And I would not hesitate to recommend it to anybody who likes bars filling and things moving fast. It's nice. It really is a lot of fun because normally I thought it was like a sim racer. I was like, I don't go in for that. I like arcade racers. And when you turn on all the assists and stuff, it really kind of plays like an arcade racer.
Nice.
As long as you're not in like the highest top tier cars, which that's like, putting a saddle on a jet, but yeah, just lots of Xbox stuff is all I've been up to.
Nice. Yeah, I also got my Series X, so I have been tinkering around with it. But before I got to my Series X, I was playing around with RetroArch. I had set it up in Steam so that I could load it up on my Steam Link on my TV.
Right. Yeah.
And I immediately started questioning why I have a RetroPie at that point. Because if I can just play all of the ROMs and ISOs that are already on my computer,
right, in a format and an infrastructure that's way easier to organize and curate,
and also with more advanced, technologically advanced hardware emulation too.
Yeah, because you can do like Dolphin and PS2 emulators, right?
Absolutely. I've got PS3 on there as well. I've got I could theoretically throw an Xbox 360 emulator on my machine. It wouldn't run through RetroArch, but I could still do it.
Right.
So there's, and it helps that at that same time, my RetroPie decided to start doing dumb shit. Because, well, first of all, I was doing dumb shit. Let's be fair. Anytime your RetroPie does something dumb, it starts with you doing something.
It's because you did. Yeah, that's the Linux. Linux is the Dark Souls of operating systems. Because everyone's always like, well, in Dark Souls, when you die, you know why you died, and it's because you screwed up. That's what Linux is like. You're like, it was going fine, and I was like, I wonder if I can make it do blank. And the answer to whatever blank is always, you can. It just might be hard.
Right.
And having that option where no matter what it is you want to do, you can make it do it, makes you try to do dumb shit.
Yeah, so here's the dumb shit I tried to do. So I learned that the guys that do the retro achievements thing, they had updated it so that it now supports PlayStation games.
Oh.
And all of my PlayStation games were in PBP format, which is the PSP format, so that you can have multiple discs in one file, so that you can easily change discs in RetroArch. Well, because those PBPs have a different checksum than a standard ISO does, the retro achievements don't work with them. So if you have PBPs, not going to work. You got to throw them out. So I was looking at other options, and they were like, well, you can do just ISOs, or you can compress them into CHDs, because once they decompress, it'll still have the same checksum as the ISO would have. And then you can just make M3 playlists for multi-disc things, and everything will be fine. And I set it up on my on my laptop, and I tested it, and it worked, and I could do the achievements, and RetroArch saw them all, and it could do the multi-disc and everything. I was like, great, now I just got to copy it over to my Pi. And I copy it over to my Pi, and it only sees the M3Us. It won't see the individual discs. And I'm like, well, this is weird. And it plays them, so it supports it. And I look it up online, and the version of Emulation Station that I'm running on my Pi doesn't recognize CHD as a valid format for PlayStation. No. And I was like, well, I'll just run update. I'll just run
updating Emulation Station on a RetroPie is it's world ending. Well, it's a world ending update.
I've never had an issue with it, so I was like, I'll just run the update. And so I run the update, and it completes instantly. Like no time wasted at all. Just it's done. I'm like, well, that's weird. And then it pops up with a splash screen that says, the version of RetroPie you're using is running on Raspbian Stretch, which is no longer supported, and no updates are created for it. You must reinstall your RetroPie to get the new update. And I'm like, if I'm going to have to rebuild this thing from scratch, I may as well upgrade from a Pi 3 to a Pi 4. And then I started pricing Pi 4s and the cases for them. And then I was like, no, I was just looking at RetroArch through my Steam Link, and it works great. I'm just going to put this off for now and not play PlayStation games on my RetroPie. There's no reason for me to do that.
But that option doesn't let you do what I've deduced is one of our favorite things in the world to do, which is buy a small computer to complete a specific task.
Exactly. Yeah. So now I'm still looking at Pi 4s, obviously. Of course I am. But I haven't bought one yet because I'm like, technically I can still perform this function from my couch comfortably. So that's, I'm sure it's in the cards. I'm sure in like a month I'm going to be on here being like, well, I got my Pi 4 in.
That's great. RetroArch one's great.
Also, on my Series X, I did, for some reason, decide that I wanted to play through all 6 Mega Man games in Legacy Collection.
Oh, do they play at 120 FPS?
Probably. I don't
4K HDR?
No, they play like NES games, Justin. And they even flicker just like an NES would. It's excellent emulation.
Perfect.
I don't know why I decided that was what I needed to use to break in my Series X.
Yeah.
But immediately it was, and so I played through all 6 Mega Man games.
It's okay. I put in several hours of Hexic HD. Nice. I was like, Series X, let's play Hexic. The game that no one but me remembers. Anybody remember Hexic?
Yeah.
That was a great game.
Was it?
Yes. Fuck you. It was great.
It was developed by Alexei Patanov, right?
I don't know, but it's great. I don't know anything about it.
Also, the Resident Evil Reverse or REverse, I'm not sure how they're saying it. The beta for that came out, and I was chosen for the beta, and I installed it on my Xbox One, actually, before the Series X came around. And I launched it in the moment that they let me download it. I download it, I launch it, and it says, oh, the public beta doesn't start for a week. So I couldn't even use it for a week there. And then my Series X came in, and then it did become that day, and I could play it. So I launched it, and it was a lot of fun. It's weird. And then 2 days later, it was gone. They shut it down. Yeah. They're like, that's all the beta. Have fun.
No more. The name is verse, and it just makes me think someone's sending me an email about Resident Evil, and I asked them about a verse in Resident Evil, and they're like, Resident Evil verse.
Yes, it is that.
I read that.
It's going to be a free bonus game with Resident Evil 8, so it's not like something people have to buy. It's just the multiplayer portion.
What about those of us that might want to play the multiplayer game but never ever want to play Resident Evil 8?
I don't know if they'll sell it separately.
Can we buy it?
It's listed on Steam separately, but only in a bundle with Resident Evil 8. I don't know if that'll change.
Steam does pretty often separate components out like that for some reason. So that,
So I don't know if that'll eventually happen or not. It is interesting though. So the way that it works is you choose a character, and it's one of the Resident Evil hero characters. You've got Chris, Jill, Claire, Leon, Ada, and Hunk.
Tails?
Tails is not there. No, I'm afraid he is stuck in Sonicverse.
Why not?
and you have a weapon, and then you can also get other weapons while you're shooting at each other. But if you die, you turn into not a zombie, but some sort of bioweapon from the Resident Evil series. And you turn into a basic one, and you can usually get in a couple of hits before somebody kills you. But there are these little virus vials that you can find around the arena, and if you pick one or two of them up, then when you die, instead of becoming the basic thing, you become like the Nemesis or that dude from Resident Evil 7. Something much bigger. Or Tails from Sonic. But yeah, it gets pretty ludicrous, and it's very fast-paced, and I'm so bad at online shooters that I was consistently last place in every match that I played. But it was still fun. I think if I were to play it with other friends, I would probably enjoy it more than with just random people who kept killing me.
Right.
But it was neat.
I got news for you, Saturn. I would also kill you.
It's fair. Yeah, but it's different when it's friends, because then we can all laugh at how bad I am. Whereas if it's with random people, when I try to make that joke, they're like, yeah, so stop playing.
Let's knock some news out. There's a lot of it, so I'm going to kind of speed through some of it because it's a lot of news.
Yeah, there's a lot.
First up, an update to a previous story. Literal minutes after our previous recording session, Microsoft reversed their announcement about Xbox Live Gold pricing, stating that prices would not change.
Yeah.
Additionally, free-to-play games will no longer require Xbox Live Gold or Game Pass Ultimate to play online.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fuck up your messaging that bad, because, man.
No,
actually... What happened?
Well, they came out and they were like, okay, we understand nobody liked this price change, so we're not going to do it anymore. We understand it upset you, so we're not going to do it, and we're not going to charge for free-to-play games anymore. So stuff like Fortnite or Apex or whatever, you can play it. You don't need a Live Gold account. Just play it. I
said it before, and I'll keep saying it until they fuck up, because eventually they will.
They will.
Microsoft has just consistently been the good guy for a long time in the video game space. Right. I don't know what they're playing at. This was even last recording session, we kind of had this air of like, oh, here's the other shoe dropping.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, you don't like it? Okay, well, sorry everybody. And we're like, it's like abused dogs.
Yeah.
We're like, well, what do you mean you're not going to do it now?
Right. Yeah. We're just expecting them to hit us.
Well,
with the
fuck you.
newspaper.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, and you're like, well, what do we? They're just gonna not do it. Like, it's like when they were launching the Xbox One and they said something about used games, and everyone got mad, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we won't do that then. And everyone was like, well, you were gonna. Like, everyone was still mad.
In fairness, it took them several days to reverse that decision.
Because we just don't know how to deal with companies being like, oh, people don't like that, let's not do it then. We're like, well, oh, well. Rumors point to a possible new Knights of the Old Republic game being developed by a studio other than BioWare/EA. I'm excited about both of those bits of information. Gabe Newell says Valve is already exploring brain-computer interfaces for future games and software development. I don't know what the fuck they're going to put in my brain, but if it plays Half-Life, I'm kind of okay with it. So
yeah, he linked to some study that shows that they're already trying to test them for like artificial limbs and stuff like that. And he was like, well, I think we could make good games with that too. I think there's software that's just waiting to be made.
Valve has gotten weird.
Yeah.
They've gotten real weird with their shit. Like releasing a full AAA $60 VR game that only like 2% of their customers can even play.
Right.
Like, just they're I feel like 10 years from now, Valve is going to be fucking out there doing weird shit.
Right.
Monster World 4 remake is given a Japanese release date of April 21st, Western release to follow in second quarter. So that's exciting.
Nice. I'm excited.
Konami officially dissolved its production divisions and has restructured them into one larger production division. At first, we thought this was very, very bad news.
Yeah.
But it seems like it really might just be some kind of internal restructuring.
Just some shuffling, it looks like. It could still end up being bad news, but who knows, because it's Konami. Everything just kind of sounds bad from them.
Yeah. All Polymega pre-orders taken from Walmart.com are canceled amid a lack of communication between Walmart and producer Playmagy. Playmagy is requesting former Walmart customers make new pre-orders that won't be fulfilled until March or April.
So two things. One, I think it's Playmagy. I think.
Playmagy?
Anyway.
I don't know.
And
Playmagy.
Two, apparently Walmart had a change in staffing of whoever maintains their web presence, and the new staff just is not talking to them at all and wouldn't accept the units and wouldn't tell them how many pre-orders there were or who pre-ordered or anything. So that's a mess. That's like I'm all for making fun of Polymega. I will any chance I get. But this one sounds like it was
Walmart.
Probably not their fault.
Yeah. A sequel to the original Pico 8 version of Celeste has been released by the original developers, and the Pico 8 version of Celeste is very good, and you should play it.
And the sequel is hard as nails. Holy shit, it is hard.
Leaked correspondence between Nintendo and Rare confirms long-standing rumors as to the reasons behind the removal of Stop and Swap in Rare's N64 platformers.
Yeah, it was always assumed that because the later models of the N64 had different brands of RAM and other hardware, that it just wouldn't hold the data long enough, and the correspondence pretty much completely confirms that.
Plex is launching a retro game streaming service priced at $5 a month and initially includes first-party Atari titles from the Atari 26 and 7800s, as well as some Atari arcade classics. Also includes the ability to add custom ROMs and emulator cores, thus making it actually useful, and requires a Parsec account to play.
Yep.
It's just Parsec.
It's just Parsec run through Plex. That's
the fuck are you doing, Plex? Parsec already has an arcade function that works great.
No, but this is through Plex.
But why?
Because this is but
Saturday,
it's $5.
I'm launching a new movie streaming service where you can stream anything on Netflix. It does require an active Netflix account and that you go to netflix.com, but you mail me $10 a month.
Oh.
Also, yeah. So if you want to sign up, you just let me know.
Well, is there a benefit to it?
Yeah. So if you just want to sign up, then that'd be great. Some drama happened on the stock market and involved GameStop, and we're really not going to get into all of the stuff because
it's not our wheelhouse.
It is very complicated. TM. It is capital V, capital C, very complicated. But
and also it doesn't really have anything to do with video games.
No, but I would like to take the moment to say fuck you, GameStop. It's unrelated to really any of that because GameStop had almost no hand in any of it.
No hand in any of this, but still fuck them
still
as a company. Yeah.
AMD says component shortages won't end for many months. They will affect console and PC part availability until 2021 at least.
It's already 2021.
Or until late 2021 at least. And NVIDIA has said similar things recently as well. So we're full on in some severe component shortage.
Oh, yeah.
Presumably due to COVID. And we said it last year, like, hey, we're going to be seeing the effects of this next year. And I think this is, we're seeing it. We,
at work, I was trying to order some laptops for some new employees, and my boss informed me that there is a 5 to 9 month waiting period on any new laptops we order.
Oh, geez.
So to please just try to steal some from other sites in the meantime.
EA opens new studio to develop the next Skate game. Cool. Early potential Wii logos emerge. Some of these are ridiculous.
Yeah,
if you've not seen the concept Wii logos that came out, they're just...
One of them looks like a Western Digital logo.
Yeah, a lot of them look like other things.
Right?
Sonic's voice actor is stepping down from the role. So that sucks.
However, the voice actor from Sonic Adventure has come forward and said that he and his agent have already contacted Sega to see if he could take the role back over. I'm waiting for Sega to say no. And then he just looks like a jackass.
Toshihiro Nagoshi, Sega's chief creative officer and creator of Yakuza, is stepping down to take the role of creative director. So it seems like a voluntary step down because he would rather be a creative director than a chief creative officer. Could just be that he wants something more hands-on. It could, I mean, we really don't know why. It could also just be maybe his personal life is blown up and he's got something going on. He needs.
And there could have been some pressure there somewhere. We don't know. This is pure speculation.
As long as they keep making Yakuza games, I don't care.
And other Sega games too.
And Yakuza games.
And mostly Yakuza.
Old School RuneScape is releasing on Steam in February. Anyway, let's get into the topic at hand. This week we're talking Mother 3.
What is that?
The much requested sequel to Mother 2, also known as Earthbound.
Oh.
Which you may remember because that game stinks.
That's true. I remember reading about that.
At least that's how they marketed it, anyway. This is a sequel to Earthbound. It is the conclusion to Itoi's JRPG deconstruction trilogy that ended up being really more heartfelt than it needed to be.
I don't know about needed to be, but certainly more than anyone expected it to be.
Yeah. This episode, we will be covering the development and gameplay. So if you're wanting to remain spoiler-free, then you should be good to listen to this episode still. We will obviously be spoiling some minor things like party members and abilities and stuff.
At some point, we're going to have
translation.
Right. We will probably accidentally mention that Boney is Luke's father at some point.
Oh, no!
Shit.
So if you're like, no, I cannot know anything of this game, then go play it first because spoiler already, it's a good game and I think we both recommend it.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey, I'm okay knowing a little bit about it, then you should be good to listen to this episode.
If we do accidentally spoil something, I'll at least try to preface it first so that there's a warning.
As far as release data, this was released on March 20th, 2006 in Japan on the GBA. That is a late GBA game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was...
Holy cow.
It was 15 years ago now, though.
Woof. Oh, man. I'm basically dead. Was developed by Brownie Brown and published by Nintendo. Mm-hmm. As far as first encounters, I was always kind of aware of this, but only in the context of it being a sequel to that one weird game, Earthbound, that people liked that I had never played. I had seen the fan community for it pop up, and they seemed like just frothing over this game. People were... I heard many people say things like, "Oh, Mother 3 is the greatest game ever made."
I heard
Mother
that
3.
too, yeah.
Mother 3 is a life-changing experience. People really like people. It was talked about in reverent tones.
Yeah.
And I tried to start it maybe a half dozen times via emulation. I could barely get out of the intro portion. Well, I know now after playing the game that I was nowhere near the end of the intro portion, but I could barely get out of the first couple hours without just being like, I'm so bored. I'm so tremendously bored, and I don't care. And so I played it before. I just had never seen it through till this episode.
Well, I would like to say that I'm probably one of those people that speaks of it in reverent tones. No, I would never say it's the best game ever made, or even one of the best games of its genre. However, it is something that I was super anxiously waiting for throughout its development. Like the very first time that they showed the N64 version in Nintendo Power, I was so excited and ready for another Earthbound, and then there was just 10 years of roller coaster, just hoping that maybe it would come out, and then it was canceled, and then it came out, and then it didn't come out over here, and then the fan translation came out, and I finally got to play it, and so yeah, I was ready for it. I was
honestly
ready.
Through all the shit this game went through, it's kind of shocking that it's even a coherent video game.
Correct. Yeah.
Really, honestly, and I guess I'm jumping ahead. So go ahead and tell us about the first attempt to develop a sequel to Earthbound.
Right. So their original idea to make a sequel to Mother 2 or Earthbound was actually pitched by Nintendo to Itoi. Miyamoto, who was the producer of the game at the time, and I think he was still listed as producer on the final one, had said it was purely a commercial decision made after the success of Mother 2. So there was no creative impetus to make a sequel at that point.
The idea of Mother 2 being commercially successful is bizarre to me because of how commercially unsuccessful in America it was.
Right. And even
the idea.
Even in North America, it sold all right, but from what I have read, it probably broke even, but barely.
Yeah.
But there was so much excess stock that it just looked like a massive failure.
Oh yeah, and we've said it before, and it's not really remembered this way, but JRPGs on the Super Nintendo sold okay.
Yeah,
but they weren't major sellers.
No, not like in Japan anyway.
And so I in this one being not only a JRPG but a really weird one. It's just weird to think of like, hey, Mother 2 was so successful, you have to make another one. It's just a weird thought.
Well, you have to think about it that not only was it so successful they wanted to make a sequel, it was so successful they wanted to put its character in Smash Brothers from the very first game.
Oh yeah.
So so they started work on it in 1994. So 12 years before the game finally released. And their original target was the Super Famicom Super CD-ROM. So we know that things are going great right off the bat.
At least it wasn't going for the Philips CDI. If it was a little bit later, it might have been targeted for that.
Gross. So obviously that failed real quickly. They moved to the N64. And the team from Mother 2 was retained, and new staff were brought on due to the new scope. And in an interview with Itoi, he revealed that they skipped prototyping and went straight to development in hopes of doing something unprecedented.
That's how making games works.
Right?
I mean, to be fair, fucking apparently it is. They did it.
Well, yeah, not that way. They didn't.
Right.
But yeah, so the goal was to have the same scope as a Hollywood film. And it
What
quickly,
does that even mean?
I don't know, but it quickly became apparent that they would be exceeding the memory limitations of N64 cartridges by a lot.
It's going to be like The Rock, but starring Ness.
Yes, exactly that. It was going to be a league of their own, but you know, with more aliens. By 97, they decided to move to the N64 DD.
Yes, another successful add-on to a Nintendo system.
At least that one released. But
the only beat they missed was Virtual Boy development. Right. They could have had the trifecta of failed Nintendo hardware.
Then eventually it was ported to Wii U. Actually, it was released on Wii U eventually. And they had thought that it was going to be a 98 launch title for the N64 DD.
Yeah.
And that's when Nintendo Power and other Western magazines started to talk about the game. That's when it started to be unveiled. They showed some early footage of it. They started calling it Earthbound 64. That's also when half of the development team left because they were busy working on a game called Pokemon. And they were like, well, this looks like it's going somewhere, so we're going to go over here. And the original development team from Mother 2 eventually became Creatures Inc., which they still do some Pokemon stuff, I understand.
They do indeed. Pokemon, it's a phone game now.
Oh,
They got it on the phones.
That popular phone game, Pokemon.
What the kids tell me.
So the first playable build of the game was shown at Space World in August 99. And it was referred to as being very far along or at least half complete. One of those things could have been correct.
We don't know which. One of them.
Yeah.
It's a product.
It was also announced at that point that the game was moving from 64DD to a 256 megabit N64 cartridge.
Woof.
Which is, first of all, a massive N64 cartridge.
Yeah.
And second of all, would require them to greatly shrink their previous scope.
Was any N64 cartridge even remotely that big?
I believe Resident Evil 2 is 512 megabits.
Oh, yeah, that one was massive, wasn't it? It is still shocking they fit it into a cartridge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 2 discs of PlayStation game. So just before the next Space World in 2000, Itoi had announced that the game had been formally canceled by producer Satoru Iwata, who was the producer in the game at the time. And Iwata later came out and clarified that the game was only canceled in its N64 form, but may appear again later on the GameCube. But no one else who was involved in the project was willing to say that. Everybody else was just like, no, it's canceled. It's over. In a later interview, Iwata said he was ashamed that he and the others from HAL and Nintendo had pushed so hard to make the game polygonal because he said Itoi's greatest talent lied in words and storytelling, and that maybe their hard push to 3D could have been what ended up being that game's collapse in direction and development.
Right. It could have been the next Quest 64.
If only.
A game that I like that game. That's a fun game.
I was so desperate for any JRPG on the N64 that...
Well, it's definitely not a JRPG, but it thinks it's one.
Yeah, I rented Quest 64 and was disgusted and angry. And
it's like what you would get if I explained what a JRPG is to my grandma and she explained it to a game developer and then they made that.
Also, they speak different languages.
Yeah. But then they did start working on the GBA version, the version we know and love.
And got.
So tell me about that. And got, yeah.
So,
well, we didn't get it, but they got it in Japan.
Fair enough. Someone got it. I have it. I have a cartridge right over there. I imported it from Japan.
There you go.
So, after they canceled the N64 game, Nintendo and Itoi considered moving the existing development to GameCube or starting over on Game Boy Advance. And Itoi just said he was done. He didn't want to make a Mother 3 anymore. Instead, they would just re-release the first 2 games. And so they started work on a port for the first 2 games to Game Boy Advance on one cartridge. And while working on that, the staff at HAL who was working on that conversion really pressured him hard to please resume Mother 3. Like, they were all apparently diehard fans and really wanted it to happen.
Right.
And so they were pitching it as a GBA game, as a successor to Mother 1 and 2. And so when Mother 1 and 2 was finally announced on a TV commercial, the end of the commercial has a little teaser where Mr. Saturn pops up on the screen and says, also, Mother 3 will be coming soon on Game Boy Advance. And the internet lost their fucking minds.
Yeah.
Like me and the other Earthbound fans on the internet, we watched that shitty real player video of that Japanese commercial so many fucking times that we think we wore out the internet.
I was just about to ask if you watched the video in Real Player, because of course this is pre-YouTube.
Yes.
So obviously you were in Real Player.
Of course, it was either Real Player or QuickTime. You only had two options.
The media hub of the internet in 2003.
Right. And most of the story from the N64 version was retained, though it was trimmed quite a bit. It was originally supposed to be a 12-chapter game. They brought it down to 8.
Yeah.
Itoi's development team had, of course, run off to Pokemon at that point, and so they needed somebody else to fill in, and so they found this team Brownie Brown that was a bunch of people that had formerly been artists at Square, and they had formed their own new studio to try to develop games, and they have since been acquired by Nintendo and rebranded One Up Studio.
Yeah.
They did the only other game I can immediately think of they did was Sword of Mana on GBA.
I'm trying to think. They seem so familiar, and I don't quite know why.
They did a handful of GBA games, mostly of the JRPG variety. And then eventually they became One Up Studio, and they've done more things. I think they did one of the more recent Mario parties, if I remember right. Excuse me. And Itoi has said that he was uninterested in computer graphics and CG and 3D, all of that.
You don't say. After all that.
Right.
I didn't even like that stuff.
Exactly, yeah. After years of trying to develop it on N64, he has since come out and been like, well, I didn't even like it then. And so he had wanted to go with the same art style as Mother 2 since they were now on the GBA.
Right.
And he later said it was also convenient that at the time Mother 3 was releasing, there was this resurgent interest in retro-style gaming. So it helped that it also happened to look like a well-beloved Super Nintendo game.
Right.
And then they released it, and it happened.
It came out in Japan, did not come to Western shores.
No.
Was there ever even like an inkling of a thought that it would ever actually like Nintendo never said anything?
No, they never said one word. So
because obviously Mother 3 has become, it's such a meme at this point that it's like, oh yeah, Mother 3 confirmed, like that's the big joke.
Holy shit, that time at E3 when they did the Robot Chicken bit.
Yeah.
And it's Reggie Fils-Aimé up there talking on a stage, and some dude in the audience says, hey, Reggie, give us Mother 3. And then he shoots him with a fire flower. Is hilarious. But also, as an Earthbound fan, also soul-crushing.
Yeah. So to clarify, because it's such a joke at this point that people may not actually know that there never have we uncovered any plans of Mother 3 coming to America officially.
Right. Even when it first released, the more adult people in the Earthbound community that looked at things from a business perspective and not from a fan perspective were like, hey guys, it's 2006 and this is a Game Boy Advanced game. It's not coming out over here.
Didn't the Wii come out in 2006?
Yes. So they were like, by the time this gets translated, the Game Boy Advance is going to be super dead. And yes, it will technically play on a DS, but why would they release a Game Boy Advance game in probably 2007 by the time they're done translating it?
Or maybe even later. It's a dense game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the localization it did get, because obviously most people seem to know that there's a translation and you can play it.
So, yeah, when the game was announced in Japan from that commercial, the Western Earthbound community, as I mentioned, lost our collective shit, and they immediately started working on a petition. And they wanted to make sure that this was as formal and official a petition as it could be. So several people from Starman.net made custom petition software that was as close to actually recording things as they could get in a as legal a fashion as they could. They you can find some very in-depth documentation about it too, if ever you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Right.
When the petition campaign was over of just Western players who wanted it to be localized, it was hand-checked by people to make sure it wasn't just loaded with a bunch of fake names and whatever. And in the end, they bound it, along with some fan art, in a 819-page book. It included all 31,000 plus signatures and some fan art.
Yeah.
And they printed multiple copies of it. It was sent to Nintendo of Japan, Nintendo of America, a couple of members of the press, like I think Game Informer got one, IGN might have gotten one. But notably, it was not made available to the public. It was just to be sent to Nintendo. This was them saying, hey, there is demand here. At least 31,000 people will purchase this. And here is some nice art we made. And no official response from Nintendo was ever issued. Several members within Nintendo have acknowledged it. Reggie, Shigeru Miyamoto, Satoru Iwata, Shigesato Itoi. They all said that they were aware of it. Several of them praised its quality and thanked the dedication of the fans. But when those same people were then asked, will it get released over here? No comment. There's no official comment at this time.
I really like to think that in like one of the Iwata asks, you can see it propping open a door in the background. You know?
Like it's holding up one of the legs of his desk or something.
Yeah.
There was a interview with Nintendo Treehouse in November 2006. So this was 6 months after the game came out in Japan, where they acknowledged that no, they are not going to be localizing the game. And so because of that, a small team of Earthbound fans announced via Starman.net, which was the big hub site for Earthbound fans at the time, that they would begin a fan translation of the game. That was spearheaded by Clyde Mandolin, also known as Tomato, who is a professional translator by trade. He's worked on anime like Dragon Ball and One Piece. He's also helped with the localization for Kingdom Hearts 2 on PS2. And of course, we've talked about him many times because of his website, Legends of Localization, and the books.
As well as his books that we both highly recommend.
Which are excellent books. All of them are. And the ROM hacking for the project was performed mainly by a guy known in the community as Jeff Mann, who has since released the tools that he developed during the translation to make it easier for him to localize the game. So that it can also be localized into other languages, because he had to write all these tools to do variable width fonts and different fonts to begin with and everything. And because of the tools he's released, the game's also been localized into Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, and Dutch. There might be others, but those are the ones I could immediately find that are complete enough to play. Which that's really cool that they made it available for everyone.
I mean, at this point, the amount of software that was made just for people to unofficially enjoy Mother 3 is already staggering.
Oh, yeah. It's very impressive. The amount of dedication of the Earthbound community is at times overwhelming.
Yeah.
So they did have to change the game's format pretty heavily to get Western-style fonts to work to begin with. Tomato has been on record saying that no text display routine wound up untouched. Like they had to mess with everything in the game. The team made a conscious effort to minimize any alterations to the game, aside from adding an intro screen at the beginning that tells you it's a fan localization and to please support Nintendo. And they did bring over some carryover graphics from the original Western localization of Earthbound, which I might mention when we get into the story later next week. But other than that, all visual elements were left untouched, and they tried to leave the story as close to the original as possible.
Which for people who are unaware of how translation and things like this project work, that doesn't mean that they just did direct translations.
No.
It still has to be translated, and it makes it even harder when you're trying to stay true to the spirit of a language that has a lot of intricacies that we may not have.
A lot of nuance that we don't have.
Yeah, and vice versa, I'm sure. You don't want to inject any nuance from our language into their story.
Right.
So it's still, to be clear, it's still a tremendous amount of work, even more work than just going, we'll make it make sense, that's fine. Which is how really most games are translated.
Right, it's certainly how every NES game was translated. Well, no, they didn't try to make it make sense.
No, they didn't.
They said that it was 1,000 pages of text that ended up translated in the end.
That is a massive script.
Yeah, especially for
massive
for just a couple of people working on it.
Right.
He said Tomato said that they had some assistance on the project, and they wanted to also keep the same kind of sense of humor that the English Earthbound localization had, which the Japanese mother games also have a sense of humor, but it's slightly different because of cultural differences.
Right. Comedy in Japan is very different than comedy in America,
or just in any English-speaking country, really.
Right? It's just really different.
Oh yeah.
In a lot of things don't play.
Right.
So it really, in some ways, it seems like it was good that they had Earthbound as something to work from. So they could be like, hey, this is, in air quotes, the official comedy stylings of this series.
Fortunately, some things didn't need to be translated, like the boxes that you open and they fart at you.
Thank goodness. They didn't have to put in American farts?
No, they could just use the same good old Japanese farts there. They did try to keep the names the same. There were some changes in names in Earthbound, and they didn't want to change those names in Mother 3. Including one that was previously changed in Earthbound, because his Japanese name makes more sense in the context of everything that happens in Mother 3. So they undid that change. The one change that they did make name-wise was there's a character named Yokuba in Japan, and that name is similar to the Japanese word for greed, and they changed his name to Facade, which sounds similar to apparently the Arabic word for corruption, but also the English word facade, which is really a French word that we just borrowed.
Stole.
Yeah,
we didn't ask them.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. No one has asked the French if we're allowed to say facade yet.
Because I guarantee you, they would say no.
They don't.
We don't say it anywhere near right, I'm sure.
That's true.
They'd be like, no, you're not using it right. Quit it.
Give it back until you've read the manual. So Reed Young, who is the co-creator of Starman.net, he made it clear from the inception of the project that they would immediately cease all work on the fan translation if ever Nintendo made a request for them to do so or announced that they were working on their own translation.
Right.
They also said that if at any point Nintendo asked them to hand over the work they had done, they would do so, no questions asked. That all work they had done would be property of Nintendo. And several people within Nintendo acknowledged the project during this time, including Reggie, though no action was ever taken by Nintendo to stop the translation.
Which is weird because they're so litigious.
Oh yeah, they are angry about that kind of stuff.
Do you ever think that maybe the fan translation potentially damaged the possibility of the game coming to the West? Because Nintendo would look and say, well, we can't do it as good as they did, so...
No. Because I've seen other games that have been fan translated that they have later put out shittier translations of.
Yeah. So. I know the ideal thing to happen, ideally, Nintendo would take the fan translation in a perfect, wonderful, imaginary pie in the sky ideal world, pay them for it.
Never gonna happen.
But certainly they'll in an ideal world they would take it for free and use that translation, but they will never use a fan translation. Nintendo.
Ever.
That's something that maybe I could see Capcom doing it.
Yeah, I could see Capcom.
Maybe Sega, maybe, but even then,
pre-merger Enix probably could have done it.
Nintendo, hell no.
No.
They absolutely
Xseed has done it.
Yeah,
they've purchased fan translations and just released them.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, obviously that never happened. And like most fan translators, they're very, very vocal about discouraging piracy. They instead told people import the original game, or at the very least try to purchase some other merchandise from Nintendo, just to offset the price of you obviously playing it in an emulator, because that was the option that you had. And before the patch released, Tomato on the starmen.net forum said he expects a couple dozen thousand downloads total by the end of the focus on this translation. There were more than 100,000 downloads directly from their site within the first week, not counting other sites that were hosting it as mirrors.
Oh my gosh.
It was huge. Their site crashed several times during that first week. That translation was praised by several websites as well as by professional translators from companies like Capcom and Square Enix. And to go along with the fan-translated game, they also began work on a full strategy guide similar to Nintendo's official strategy guide for Earthbound. And work on the guide began back in 2008, and then it released in 2009. And while they were working on the guide, Reed Young, again, co-founder of Starman, he had founded Fangamer, which we all know today, but it was originally just his spin-off of his Earthbound website.
Right, to sell the guide on.
Pretty much designed to sell the guide on, but then they ended up having other merchandise before the guide was ready. It was sold exclusively. It's still sold exclusively through Fangamer. And the guide has also, of course, received rave reviews, but it is neat to think that one of the things that came from this fan translation of Mother 3 is Fangamer, which is an excellent site that I have shopped from many times.
Let's talk about the actual video game.
There's a video game?
Because to now, we have not.
Yeah.
And it feels weird, but we're going to try to get through the presentation and gameplay so we can talk story and impact next week.
So it's a Souls-like walking simulator, right?
Yeah, but it's not. That's not totally wrong. Presentation-wise, I do want to discuss how amazing this game looks.
Yeah.
For I mean, granted, it's a GBA game in 2006. Sure. It should look pretty good. But this has to be one of the best looking GBA games that I've ever played. Yeah, by a wide margin.
And it still uses that same art style that Earthbound used.
Yeah,
the same kind of character designs and stuff. Just with better detail. And better animation for everything.
Yeah. It's an extremely well animated game. There are a lot more animations in this than I've come to expect in any 2D game.
Right.
A lot of animations that are only used a single time, although the game's MO seems to be we did this whole thing just to do it once.
Right.
And it is just graphically a very well put together game. If you like 2D art or sprite work or sprite animation, this is a treasure trove of really wonderful things to look at. It really, really is. From beginning to end, it's just a great looking GBA game.
It is a little weird to go to it directly from Earthbound, though, just because even though the backgrounds seem mostly proportional to Earthbound, all the characters are slightly taller. And so the proportions seem a little out of whack there.
Yeah.
And it can really mess with you. But once you get used to it, which happens within a couple hours of gameplay, all that fades away.
Yeah. Let's talk soundtrack, which really should be its own. Really, this should be a 4-episode series where we cover development and localization, and then the soundtrack, and then the gameplay, and then the story.
Right.
But my God, we don't. There's not enough hours.
Yeah. There's not enough weeks in the year.
This is easily one of the best, most varied soundtracks on the GBA. It is still GBA hardware.
Yes,
there's some limitations,
right?
But it has so many memorable tunes, and not only that, I feel like every single song has at least 3 remixes or revisions throughout the game.
Yeah, one thing that when I first played the game back in I guess it would have been 2009 or so, 2008. I had been taken off guard by the fact that there's a separate song that plays when you open the menu, because obviously that didn't happen in the previous games because it was just an old style NES menu.
Right.
But it has this separate song that plays just for the menu, and I think it's a separate song for save screens and shops that all use the same basic menu interface. And at first I was really like, I don't know why, but I was resistant to it. I was like, I don't want separate menu music. Just keep playing whatever music I'm listening to.
What a weird...
I know. It's the dumbest thing to be upset about. But I think I was just looking for things that were different from before to be upset about, because it was a new game, obviously. And within just a few hours, I had decided that the main menu music was my favorite song in the game. And I would just sit on the menu and just like jam to it for a little bit. Yeah. Because it's just so chill.
My favorite was the inside the building music in Tazmily Village. Like when you go into houses and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Which adds the basically you're going to end up with a song that you like in this game. It is a very musically focused game.
Yeah.
And it's far enough along in the grand scope of video game development that the songs feel like actual songs instead of just a video game soundtrack, if that makes sense.
And there were 2 separate soundtracks released, and for a little while they were available on iTunes internationally. It was the only official Mother 3 merchandise you could purchase outside of Japan for years until the Lucas amiibo came out.
Yeah. And I do want to gush about the sound more, but we have to move on. Let's talk gameplay.
It's a game.
Which was previously a section that Saturn left basically blank.
I had some stuff in here. I had gone to effort to make sure I put in more things than I normally put in gameplay, which was still very little. Because when I play a game, I'm just like, I am playing the game and I'm going through the motions and my hands are taking care of things. And then when I'm done playing the game, I'm like, I don't know, I did game stuff.
As we mentioned before, this is by rights a JRPG. It is a turn-based combat menu-driven system. But the big battle innovation that it has is the sound battle system.
Yes.
And what it is the sound battle system awards the player up to 16 total combo hits on a normal attack, so not a special attack or an item, just a regular attack, as long as the A button is repeatedly pressed to the beat of the music.
Right. Well, technically to the enemy's heartbeat is what it's supposed to be.
Right. And really what it is the backing beat of whatever the song is.
Yes.
Right. And this in what I do, normally I don't love dexterity components in turn-based games. But this one is, I don't want to say it's fully optional, but it's not as mandatory as these systems are in something like the Super Mario RPG games, where they really do expect you to be figuring out this dexterity game they've built into the turn-based battle system. Because the extra damage you do isn't tremendous.
No. It's honestly, in most battles, it's negligible. Especially for the first half of the game, where your extra hits are maybe going to do 1 HP after the first one.
But it does really, it forces you to become intimately familiar with a lot of music in the game. So it has you appreciating the soundtrack more, and there are some really good battle tunes.
Oh, yeah. I like the Mr. Batty theme for the enemy called Mr. Batty is just a remix of the Adam West Batman theme.
And what you'll learn is you'll learn that because there's only so many enemy songs, right? And they just mix them up. You'll learn that you have favorite enemy songs.
Right.
And sometimes you'll hear like a variation of your favorite enemy song, and you'll already be okay with the timing on it. So there are certain songs that I could get 16 hit combos regularly, but then there's other songs I couldn't get a 2-hit combo.
And then there's occasionally a song where you'll encounter a new enemy and it starts playing the same song that it did on a previous enemy, and you're like, oh, I got this. And then it occasionally throws an extra beat in every now and then. Yeah. Just to fuck you up.
So in really praising the sound battle system is again praising the soundtrack and how dynamic the sound and music is in this game.
Right.
I struggled with the sound battle system at first because the timing structure is very weird to learn.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's a little off to me. And I have a suspicion about this that is probably untrue. But when I play on my GBA, I have a way harder time than playing on my GameCube via my Game Boy player on LCD television.
Weird.
And the difference is that on a TV or in an emulator, you're going to be experiencing some amount of lag.
Right.
And it almost feels like the game was programmed to expect a little bit of that.
Well, there is a Game Boy Player logo that displays at the beginning of the game.
True.
So maybe Nintendo tried to factor that in.
Right. And I know the Mother 3 fan community is voracious enough that they already have the answer to that.
I am certain they do.
I just don't know it and I couldn't find it. But it feels like the timing of the sound battle system was really meant to be played on something that expects a little bit of lag, which lends itself well to emulators, which is how most people are going to play the game.
Yeah.
It does not lend itself so well to original GBA hardware because I had a ROM hack version of the game, a bootleg.
Yeah, the only guy that I knew who could consistently get 16 hits on just about every enemy exclusively insisted on playing the game only on the Game Boy Micro. And nothing else.
But yeah, as far as things it kept from Earthbound, it kept the rolling HP meters that Earthbound used and seems to make a much bigger use of them.
Yeah, one thing that I always notice in Mother 3 and don't notice in Mother 2, which may still be there and just I'm less observant because it's not as necessary, is in Mother 3, if you guard and you take damage, the meter rolls slower.
It goes real slow.
Until it's your next turn, which may happen in Earthbound, but I just never use that.
It does. The game does seem to deal with much more extreme changes. Like it's got big hits and big heals all the time. Everything's peaks and valleys. Everyone's either almost dead or they're fully healed. And it seems to do that intentionally so that your meters are always rolling. It seems to really want you to play with the rolling meters. In Earthbound, I remember knowing the rolling meter was there and then I could play with it in that way, but it never seemed to come up.
For me, it always came up if somebody was taking mortal damage. That's when I would panic and immediately heal, and if I got it in time, it was amazing. But otherwise, I would just yell at it and be angry about the whole fucking thing.
It also keeps the dynamic of two characters with spell-like abilities, one specialty character, and one largely item-using character.
Well, there were 3 casters in Earthbound. Because Ness, Paula, and Pooh could all use psi abilities.
Well, you still got the useless item character.
Yes.
Which in this one,
Jeff has become a dog.
Yeah, it's Boney, and Boney sucks.
Oh, I love Boney.
It does keep the relatively obtuse inventory system from Earthbound. Characters have a pretty limited inventory. You have to deposit items, and I actually find the inventory more annoying in this.
Really?
Because there seem to be less item deposit locations. Because in Earthbound, couldn't you, any save point, you could call for a courier?
You could, but there are areas where they can't show up. And also, you have to have cash for them.
Right.
You have to be in an area where they can appear, and there can't be any enemies around. Well, some enemies are allowed.
I just remember in Earthbound being like, oh, it sucks I have to call the courier. What an obtuse system. But in this one, I was like, there were multiple points in the game where I was like, where is the fucking item guy? See, I need to deposit some items.
I have the opposite problem. I find it to be far less obtuse than in Earthbound because of the key items inventory. Because in Earthbound, you're constantly weighed down with all the shit you have to carry that you don't necessarily want to. Whereas in this one, most of what you have on you is going to end up being your equipment, healing items, or attack items.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is mostly unnecessary. So if you don't need it, rather than going to find an item guy, I'll just toss it.
And again, in such an item, it is a very item-focused game in the same way that Earthbound was very item-focused compared to a lot of other RPGs.
Right.
Like Final Fantasy, a lot of the Final Fantasy games, you can go through the whole game without using an item except maybe a Phoenix down or two.
You'll have 20 megalixirs at the end of the game, but you never used them.
This is very item-focused, you know. So I was always worried about using the wrong item or using an item that I wouldn't be able to get more of later, and I never was really sure.
I also abused the trick to just constantly have a full inventory of hot springs eggs once I got to Chapter 5, because that's so easy, and then you have unlimited healing items.
Other things that it changed from Earthbound, characters have non-psi abilities that they use in battle, special abilities.
Right. Because Duster has some abilities that he can use that are not standard psi abilities, and I believe Flint as well. That you never had that in the previous games. Before, it was just attack or psi or items. That is it. That is your only options.
They also added facing. You could attack enemies from behind, and they would be facing the other way in battle, and you'd have different factors based on that. They swapped out the hotels for hot springs.
Right.
You basically never really worry about money.
No.
All your money is auto deposited, so you never lose it unless you spend some by getting some out of the bank. So I mean, they don't even give you money until like halfway through the game.
Right, yeah. It's halfway through the game when money shows up, and there's so few things that are just vital for you to purchase in the game.
Yeah.
That it's not much of a factor.
They swapped out the phones for frogs.
Yes.
So you save at frogs, and the frogs are also your ATM.
Right.
And there are so many save points that I kind of don't know why they didn't just put a save option in the pause menu.
Right.
There are some frogs where there was one frog near the end of the game where I saved and then walked through the door he was next to, and there's another frog on the other side of the door.
There's
like
a lot of
Starbuckses.
situations like that.
Like, they added a run button. You can sprint through weaker enemies, but this time they instantly die and you get no XP.
Yeah, I was sad that they took away the system from Earthbound, where if an enemy was too weak and you walked into it, it would just instantly give you experience.
Right, and they removed the old school Dragon Quest style menu, so now it's got a contextual button where you can just walk up to stuff and push the button.
Yeah.
It has a chapter-based structure that allows for multiple main characters, which is we'll talk more about that next episode. And they removed the teleport ability.
Which I am sad about, because I feel like that game really could have used it.
It could have, but at the same time...
But where would you go with it?
Yeah, exactly. It really is a much more structured game than Earthbound. It's very much like, hey, there are a couple of points where it opens up, but it's still like, oh yeah, you can do 2 things. Which one do you want to do? And you're like, okay, well, whatever,
There's a point in chapter 7 where you can go almost everywhere. I mean, it doesn't tell you that, but if you start looking, you can go almost everywhere in the game. And there are some advantages of going everywhere, getting optional items and stuff, and being able to grind for easy experience or easy money or whatever.
Right.
But getting back and forth to do those things is a real pain in the ass because you have to walk everywhere.
In the end, I did really end up enjoying the gameplay of Mother 3. The problem was I didn't get the opportunity to enjoy it until a little over halfway into the game.
Oof.
And we'll talk about why next episode, but the game doesn't really get you in your party.
Right. Until chapter 5, really.
Yeah, and learning the party dynamic and playing with a full party of characters until very far into the game.
Yeah.
And I don't love how rigidly structured the characters are. Each character has specific strengths and weaknesses,
right?
And you can't do a lot to change that,
right?
Lucas is always going to be your main healer. Boney's always going to be your item guy,
right?
And so it does kind of structure things very specifically, but really the whole game is pretty rigidly structured.
Duster and Boney are my healers for most of the game.
Well, I guess if you're going mostly item healing, I always used Lucas for my healing because he's got the healing spell that heals everybody.
That's true, yeah. But by the time he has that, then yes, he has become my primary healer.
Yeah.
But up until that point, I use a shit ton of Hot Springs eggs.
Well, I don't have a shit ton of Hot Springs eggs.
But they're free, and they give you as many as you want.
I don't even know about them.
No, next to we'll get to it.
But I do like the gameplay. It was enjoyable. It's a good JRPG. I like the sound battle system. It's also, especially in the early chapters, a very hard game. But I didn't, and I should note, I wasn't following the guide until I don't know, chapter 4 or 5. I had referenced it once or twice because I was like, hey, I'm not quite sure what to do, but I wasn't like following the guide. And before you get your full party, it almost feels like, especially the boss battles and stuff, they seem to still expect your full party and you don't have them yet. And so some of the early battles can be really rough.
I also just replayed it just so that I would make sure that I had a fresh perspective on all of it.
Yeah.
And I had the guide on hand, but I was pretty much only using it as a map. I was more or less ignoring it for everything else. And I didn't encounter those same issues, but I also was grinding a lot. throughout the entire game, which is how I play every JRPG, really. But I feel like the game might just kind of expect that a little.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
The bosses are still pretty tough, especially the first half of the game.
I have a hard time grinding in this game. I find it problematic because the random encounters, they will kick your ass.
Oh, yeah.
It is not the kind like, I don't mind grinding where I'm like watching TV and pressing the A button in a game. But man, I'm really the only saving grace as far as the difficulty early on in the game, because I found the game very tough early on, was that when you die, you just go back to the last frog you were at and you're fine, and you don't lose anything unless you still had money, which why would you? Because it's all auto-deposited into the bank.
Right.
The boss battles themselves are very reliant on stat alteration stuff, offense up and down, defense up and down abilities.
Which is borrowed from Dragon Quest.
Yeah. Like Dragon Quest, it's very much a game of buffs and debuffs.
Yeah.
You're constantly like, all right, do I have my max buffs and debuffs on at all times? And if you're not playing it that way, you will lose.
Yeah.
You'll lose fast. They will kill you very fast. But I by the end of it,
the bosses are pretty tough, but like you mentioned, the random encounters can be pretty brutal. And there were a lot of areas where I would just stand right next to the hot spring and just fight whatever enemy was closest to the hot spring, and then immediately return and then just fight it again over and over again until I could get through 2 battles without having to run back to the hot spring. And until I could, get to the next save point or hot spring without having to heal up, I would just keep grinding. So it was time consuming, but it did make the game more manageable.
Yeah. So I don't mean to make it sound like I was down on the combat. I did enjoy it. Sure. I did enjoy the gameplay. I wish there was more of it in the game.
Yeah.
Because
just grind more. There'll be a lot more.
Yeah. Once you get your party, you're like, man, the party dynamic is pretty fun. It's fun playing with all these different systems in the sound battle and figuring out everybody's abilities and how they work. That's cool. Right. It takes a while to get there.
It's true.
It is not a gameplay first game.
Right.
But that kind of puts us into territory for next episode. So we will...
There's still so much more to cover, Justin.
Literally the entire story. We have no other choice. So yeah, that's our first part on Mother 3. Yes. So now you're caught up on the development, the localization, the soundtrack, the graphics, and the gameplay. And next week, we will literally talk nothing but story, because this is very much a game that wants to tell you a story.
Yes.
God damn it. Sit down and listen to its story. Shut up and listen.
And then we'll give you a stink bug that'll repeat it to you.
Anyway, thank you for listening to the show. We hope you tune in next week. For people that are nervous about spoilers, next week we will be very clear, like, hey, the spoilery stuff is starting now. So if you can listen to like the first part of the episode if you want, or not. I don't know. But if you like the show, and I hope you do, because you just listen to the whole thing, then you can support us at patreon.com/Retro Warriors, just like all of our wonderful patrons that we're going to thank this week, such as Osfincter Says What?
Chris Britt,
Edward Majewski Jr.,
Fryskungen,
James Taylor,
Keokilla,
McRibbed for Her Pleasure,
Nick Brown,
Rick Jackson,
and Sharp Cheddar
are all wonderful patrons that support us at patreon.com/Retro Warriors. Indeed. You can also rate and review us on your podcast aggregator of choice. It helps a whole lot. Indeed. So please go do that. Yes. And please tune in next week where we talk more Mother 3.
Yes.
Or if you're an uncut patron, tune in now.
Minutes.
Mere moments from now. Anyway, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Yes. And as always, let us cling together.